Greetings, everyone. This is Joe Melfi, and we had a session just a moment ago that ended with a lot of great information about securing your computer, and in that was mentioned VPN. If you were waiting for a little more information, well, now's your chance. We're going to spend about 45 minutes going through some slides and talking about how you can protect yourself using VPN, especially if you are out and about in coffee shops and hotels. This is especially where you want to use VPN. We'll talk all about that, so let's go ahead and get moving here. So everybody should know, if you own a technical device and you're using it to access information, whether it's from your home or anywhere else, you kind of have a responsibility yourself to understand what you're getting into. And you want to take steps. In order to understand how to take those steps, you need to do a little bit of research yourself. It's your responsibility, just like learning how to drive. You need to learn how to practice safe computing. So we're going to talk about one aspect of safe computing using VPN. There's plenty more, and it's up to you to figure out how to use all these different components so that you can be safe on the internet. So we're going to focus on VPN. I'm going to talk a little bit about how it works, the different types that are available, some of the apps and software that are out there today, and the devices and hardware, free versus pay. Everybody likes free, but there's caveats. We'll talk about those. And in understanding how it works, we need to talk a little bit about the bigger picture. And we are home users, but corporations have taken great steps that we can learn from and how they secure their business. We don't want to do everything they're doing because it's quite elaborate, but we want to do a simplified version of what corporations are doing, because to us, our data is as important to us as a corporation's data is to them. So we start out by saying who should be using VPN. And by the time we get done, I hope you understand that in today's world, with the computing that we do, everybody should consider using VPN. It was once just something that was used by corporations because it was pretty complex. It used a lot of equipment, and it required a lot of upkeep from IT staff. But today they've got simple solutions that are very low cost. And thanks to open source and cloud business models, today this is within reach of everybody. So it's time to start thinking about it. So when you talk about security, you have to look at the big picture. So today you should be using antivirus software, password managers, and that type of stuff for viruses, worms, malware, phishing, you name it. There's a lot of stuff out there, and at a minimum, you need to have this type of software running. You also need to keep your system up to date to make sure that all these things that you installed don't become vulnerable. And they will over time, and they need to be updated to get around all these security issues. Further, if you're using web browsers to surf the web, you need to worry about privacy, and that includes things that you have probably heard about: cookies, things that maybe aren't as well known, beacons and trackers. Websites use analytics and scripts. So there are privacy protection programs out there. You can use a secure browser. You can use ad blockers and script blockers. And these are things that are another layer on top of your antivirus. We're not going to talk much about those here. I'll touch on a couple of aspects of it, but remember, we're focusing on VPN here. And the other part of the secure VPN solution for you should be a firewall. Firewalls prevent intrusion from an outside coming into your computer. And I recommend, even if you have a hardware router that has firewall in it, you should still have firewall software running on your computer, and this is especially true for any mobile device. Anytime you take it out into the public, you lose the protection of that hardware firewall device, therefore you should have software. And then finally, the star of the show, VPN. You want to hide your information from snooping eyes, and you want to make sure that your data is not corrupted or changed and used for bad intent. So this is where we're going to use encrypted VPN tunneling. So if you aren't aware, the internet is a public network. I know you can't access it, you don't know where it is, so you think it's private. But in terms of technology, this is considered a public network. There are many nodes on the internet that have to connect to other nodes. And these nodes are vulnerability points. There are people that know how to access the internet, but the way they usually get in is from other users. Once they compromise somebody's computer, they get access to the internet through that person's computer. Therefore, we have to consider that the internet itself is a public network. That means anytime you use it, your data becomes vulnerable. So keep that in mind. Public Wi-Fi is the biggest concern you should have. If you go to a coffee shop, get yourself a cup of coffee, sit down, maybe you're checking the web, checking your email, could be on a computer, could be on a phone, could be on anything, or your smartwatch. There are a number of devices today that we don't think of that are vulnerable because they're attaching using Wi-Fi. Most of the time, we leave Wi-Fi and Bluetooth enabled all the time. It's really convenient for us. That's a bad habit, but it sure makes life convenient. You really should be shutting that off until you actually need it. A lot of us don't do that. So you need to take steps. And one of the best steps you can take is to do VPN, because when you do connect, this will encrypt the data that goes between your device and the internet. So keep that in mind. Well, we all heard about net neutrality. And basically, we're counting on the government to help enforce this, because when it comes to internet service providers, cable TV providers, those types of entities, they want our data. They don't want anything to be private, and they don't want to have limitations on how they can enforce the data, the traffic, the usage. So we, as users, again, are sort of stuck finding ways to protect ourselves, because it's not going to happen through Congress or through corporations. You may have heard recently that Congress is allowing ISPs to snoop and sell our data. There was legislation to prevent that. And not that long ago, they decided, we'll let the ISPs have that data and do what they want with it. This is very bad. It's a very big step in the wrong direction. And again, we need to protect ourselves. Who's prosecuting all these people that are doing all these cyber crimes? The spammers and the telemarketers and the thieves and the phishers and the ID thefts. It's not easy to catch them, and it's very expensive. And the government isn't doing enough. So again, we can't count on them. They're taking steps, but boy, we really need a lot of legislation. We get into a very difficult area because on one hand, we want the government or somebody that's got the authority to help prevent the problems we're already facing, and they're only going to get worse. But at the same time, we don't want too much snooping from the government. We don't want too much control by the government. So this is a tough place for us. In the next few years, it's going to be very interesting to see how this plays out. In the meantime, use VPN and get yourself protected. Remember, our data is our business. It should not be for sale, and it should not be snooped, tracked, taken, or sold, period. It's ours. Unfortunately, we have lost control, and we will probably continue to lose more control. We would like to see everything on websites to default to opt in as no and opt out as yes. Unfortunately, these websites and services that we use are really designed to make it convenient for the service provider. So therefore, these things are usually defaulted to the wrong way. Always go into your settings of every program and every service that you use and check your privacy settings. Permission to steal our data should not be a requirement of service. So here's an example. One of the things we have to worry about when we're in a public place, and it's called a man-in-the-middle attack. And the reason it's called man-in-the-middle is because you as a user have a device, and you want that device to access information on the internet. And you really want a straight connection with nobody looking at your data, going right to the internet and coming back. But it is possible for somebody who is a bad actor, one of these deviant people that knows how to hack and steal your information, they can tap in between. And what they usually do is they set up a fake hotspot. in a coffee shop, for example, and you attach to it because it says free Wi-Fi. Okay, you're looking for free Wi-Fi. That must be the one to connect to. When you connect to that person, he intercepts it and then relays it to the internet. The traffic comes back, goes to this fake free Wi-Fi, and then back to you. So now he's seeing everything that's in the middle. This is very scary. And there are people who actually do this. It sounds like something you might not want to worry about much because, gee, how many people really do this? It happens often enough. And it happens at conventions, it happens in hotel rooms, happens in coffee shops and libraries. You have to be concerned. It can even happen, you know, in your friend's house. Maybe you're somewhere where you're trusting networks and you think you're connecting to the right network, but the name fakes you out and you're connected to something you shouldn't be. So I would recommend in all cases, just run VPN. And then even if you accidentally connect to the wrong one, you're a lot safer. How do they do this? Well, if you're a man in the middle, you run a program that's called a packet analyzer, or sometimes called a sniffer. And this packet sniffer intercepts all the data that runs through. And then it analyzes it. It converts it from this lots of ones and zeros and mysterious code into things that are more meaningful. So if you take a look in our example here, we've got a main screen capturing lots and lots of packets. But then the deviant person can set up filters to specifically look for things like username and user password. So the highlight screen that's up in the upper right shows you where they found a username and a password. So some products that you're using use what they call clear passwords, where it's not encrypted. But we're getting better. A lot of services are using encrypted passwords. But you don't know. As a user, you don't really know. So you need to be protected. And VPN would make it encrypted so that they would not be able to see this information. So is it really that bad? Do we have to worry? Well, take a look at some of the things that have been happening lately, right? Doesn't matter if you're running Windows, Mac OS, Linux, Android, iOS, it does not matter. People are still repeating the same words. Oh, I have a Mac and they don't get viruses. Yes, they do. Okay. Mac does a better job. Apple in general is a lot stricter on guidelines for people that develop programs that run on their devices. Yes, they're better, but they're not perfect. If you're surfing the internet with a web browser, that web browser is vulnerable. So it doesn't matter which operating system, they're all vulnerable. Remember that. Doesn't matter what device you're on. It's a computer or a smartphone. It could be a TV streaming device. If you watch Netflix and Hulu and those types of things on a box that you connect to your TV, those can be vulnerable too. You can get special versions of VPN that runs on those boxes. Yes, it's going to get complicated because you have to put something on every device. But here, we're going to try and help you. Hopefully, by the time we get done with this presentation, you'll be a little bit more educated and you'll be able to select some products that'll work for you. You've heard about Experian and Equifax have been hacked. Recently, WPA2, the part of Wi-Fi that makes your Wi-Fi secure, has been found to have a vulnerability. Fixes are rolling out for that right now. SSL, the part of the internet that brings you secure browsing, when you get HTTPS in the address bar, they found problems with that. But they've upgraded and replaced all of the old stuff, so you're okay today. But this is an ongoing thing. Things are always being, you know, pushed to the limits. And then they come up with better fixes. Sort of related to this, so I throw in here, it's not really related to VPN, but Blueborn is a Blueborn is a Bluetooth vulnerability that has recently been discovered. And it affects smartphones and computers and all that. There are fixes that are rolling out right now. So again, it's just part of the whole security picture. I thought I'd throw that in there. So what do we do? Lots of people get compromised, and you don't want to be one of them. What do we do? Well, keep your OS and applications up to date. Use all the security software that we mentioned. Common sense, the user is the most important and the most vulnerable part of the whole security picture. You have to have good habits. Be careful what you click. Look before you click. Watch, try to understand. If you don't understand something, search the internet, go to YouTube. There are lots of pieces of information out there that will help educate you. And you really should learn about some of this stuff to be safe. And finally, use VPN. How can VPN help? Okay, let's talk about what this is going to actually do for you now, right? So normal internet traffic gets split up into little pieces. So it doesn't get transmitted as one giant thing. Think of like a set of encyclopedias. They're broken into volumes. Each volume is broken into chapters, chapters into pages, paragraphs, words, all down the line, right? So when they're sending information, they break it into smaller, more manageable pieces called packets. At the front of the packet is a header that contains information that's not part of the data. Things like your source address, where it's coming from, destination address, where it's going to, what type of protocol is being used. This is very important because it tells the other computers and devices that are receiving these packets how to handle this packet. And this is where it tells that the information is encrypted using VPN. And then finally, at the end of this is a piece of information that's used for calculating a checksum or a CRC to make sure that that data hasn't been corrupted, whether it be by accident or malintent. The part that we're really interested in is your data that's called the payload. So the payload is the part that gets encrypted. And this is key to a couple slides that are coming up. Your data in the payload gets encrypted, but the rest of it does not, because the rest of it is information that's needed by protocols to send and receive your information across the internet. So again, the data goes through what we're calling a tunnel. And this tunnel, what it's trying to do, based on the information in the header, it's associating all the packets that are floating around in this public network called the internet. Your data is associated with other parts of your data. And although physically they don't go in a separate path, they all go to this public network, but they're treated in a logical way, not a physical way, but a logical way, to be a separate and private tunnel. This is where we call it, it's a virtual private tunnel. In the old days, when we had phone lines connecting everything, companies would pay for a private line or a leased line. You may have heard those terms. Today, this is the equivalent. If you use VPN, it brings you the benefits and then some of the old private and leased lines. All right, let's get into it a little bit here. We're going to get a little bit technical, but I don't want to get too deep. It does get technical quick, and it takes a lot of time, which we don't have. So I'm going to skim. And if you really want to understand this better, there are lots of places on the internet that have videos and documentation and tutorials. So I encourage you, if you're really curious, that's what you can do. There's a thing called AAA security, and this is really more about corporate security, because they do take things to the extreme. We're going to talk briefly about that. Cryptography and encryption, these are parts of encrypting your information so it's scrambled, that payload gets changed. And security protocols that make all this happen, these are industry-wide standards, things like SSL, IPSec, and OpenVPN. We'll talk very briefly about a couple of these. At the heart of how this works, there's a thing called certificates. And you may occasionally see some messages popping up on your computer when you're surfing the internet, something about an invalid certificate or other type of problem. We're going to talk briefly about what that is. Again, it gets very complicated, but maybe this will help you understand a little bit about what some of these things are. And then finally, the certificates are used to create public and private keys, and they use what's called Internet Key Exchange. This is the protocol that initiates secure transmission. So AAA stands for Authentication, Authorization, and Accounting. And whether you're a corporation who takes great steps to follow these in detail, or if you're a home user like most of us who one way or another, we manage to do these things without even realizing it. You know, what you're trying to do is authenticate. Basically, you want to make sure that you are who you say you are. So when you connect to something and you give a password, username and password, you're authenticating that you are you. Authorization is, okay, once you connect, what privileges do you have? So depending on what you're connecting to, you may have a basic pay program. You may have the advanced professional version that gives you more privileges. That's one example. And accounting, something we don't think much about, but in a corporate world, they do this a lot. They log what you do. They measure performance and throughput and those types of things. This is used for billing. So this is something you may not see so much, but guarantee your ISP is monitoring everything you're doing so they can do billing and manage your bandwidth, et cetera. All right, here's a quick example. Data in packet form needs to go from point A to point B. So here we have Dave and Alice are connected to each other and they want to send information to each other, but it needs to be encrypted. How does that work? Okay, so Dave on the left has a piece of information that is simply hello Alice. Wants to send that secure, encrypted, and this is how it's done. Data becomes obscured or scrambled by an encryption method that's based on using a public key. The public key is the part that, as it says, public, can be out there and anybody can use it, right? There's a public key and a private key. The private key, only the server or the main person has this private key, but the public key is the one that you share. You share with people that you want to communicate with. So when Dave connected, he received a certificate, and a certificate generated his public key. That public key is the part that does the scrambling of his data. So his hello Alice turns into gobbledygook. That gobbledygook gets sent over the internet, and now it's at Alice's end where she has to process this and turn it back into something she can read. So here the data becomes unobscured by decryption using the server's private key. The private key is applied and the data becomes now readable and it says hello Alice. There's a lot more that goes on here, but this is a very simplified snapshot of how it's done. I'm not going to go deep into this, but if you want to do some research, I've got a couple slides with a few things you want to look into. But the important part to take out of this is when you start looking for VPN solutions, they will ask you what type of protocol you need to support. There are some things that are very well geared toward corporate environments, and then there are some things that are not well geared for corporate. They're more intended for home users because they're simplified and easier to implement. And so you get into triple DES and AES. These are terms that are pretty popular. We used to use SSL, and you still may think of SSL when you're doing web browsing using HTTPS, but HTTPS has been replaced by TLS. Again, I'm not going to go into the details of this, but if that's something that gets you curious, go for it and do some web searching. PPTP, SSTP, layer 2. Okay, what do we really need to worry about? Probably the best advice I can tell you, find a product that uses OpenVPN. Why? OpenVPN is the latest and greatest. It is well received by experts, it's widely used, and it is the most recent. So in terms of technology, every year, you know, technology gets better, right? Processing gets better because the CPUs and the hardware get better. So right now, OpenVPN is what you should be looking for in a VPN solution. That's what that little lock and the HTTPS means in your browser up in the address bar, okay? In the past, HTTPS was only used in corporate environments or in situations where you really absolutely had to have encryption for things like banking. If you did online banking, that was over an encrypted connection. If you were shopping and you put things in your shopping cart and then you paid for them with a credit card, that was done with HTTPS because you didn't want people having your credit card information. It cost money and used processing power to support HTTPS. So at one time, it was restricted to only where it was needed. But today, it's far easier, and the overhead and the cost is minimal. Lots of websites have already switched to HTTPS for just normal browsing, but we're going to see a lot. Regular websites are all going to switch over to HTTPS. Google recommends to all its people that use all the Google stuff that everybody should be using HTTPS. And that's what's going to happen soon. So yes, HTTPS will already be doing some encrypting. But remember, if we're talking about surfing the web or using a web browser, then we're talking about HTTPS. That is secure. But you could have other programs that access the cloud, that share files, that do other types of data access and don't use a web browser. Those are not protected by HTTPS. For those, you need to have VPN. Let's take a look at 3 cases, give you an idea how this kind of works out in real life. And the first one we're going to look at is sort of a really bigger picture, then we're kind of simplify it as we go down. And this is a corporate use that was very common and still common today. And today we have a lot of people who work at home. They're called teleworkers. So you want that teleworker to connect to the corporate network and have access just as if he was working from the main office. He needs access to the servers. He needs to be able to share files. He needs to communicate with his fellow employees. VPN can do that securely. So they can set up a computer and a telephone in the remote location, be it in a satellite office or at a person's home, connect over a VPN tunnel, and now he's encrypted as if he was working right at the corporate headquarters. So the key components here is the destination network that you're trying to connect to is, in this case, the corporate network, and you need to have your network servers and computers and resources that need to be accessed. That's your target. You need firewall and VPN that does the securing. Then at the other end, the VPN client needs to be running the right software, or in some cases hardware, that make the other side of the connection. So it becomes a point-to-point. The point we're trying to get to is the corporate environment, and the point we're connecting from is the client or the teleworker, right? Those are the 2 ends of the tunnel. Now, if we look at a little different version, something that's more like we use for our home users, maybe we want to access our own computer instead of a work computer. So if you have a laptop or a tablet or a phone and you want to access your home computer, you can have your own little personal cloud. But while you're doing this away from home, you don't want people to be capturing your email, your photos, all your programs, your credit cards, your information, whatever you store on your computer. You want all that safe. So you need to use VPN to create a tunnel. Again, the 2 endpoints are, in this case, your home computer at the destination or target end, and in your remote device, which could be a computer or a mobile device. And sometimes this could be done with hardware, sometimes this could be done with software at either of the endpoints. Doesn't matter, because you're still trying to create a virtual private network through 2 endpoints. Very similar to the corporate environment, but now this is sort of toned down for personal use. And then take that a little bit further. How can you simply implement VPN without having to set up all of that? Because those last 2 examples take a lot of knowledge and care to set up properly. So we're going to talk about VPN services that provide everything you need to know, and you install them, you log into them, and you're pretty much ready to go after that. And these are really geared for protecting you with public Wi-Fi. So this is kind of the star of the show here is, the VPN solution that you can install on all your devices to be safe with the least amount of hassle, least amount of expense. So here's a typical example. You're using your computer to access the internet. Uh-oh, here comes a bad guy trying to do man-in-the-middle attack. How do you get around this guy so that you don't have anybody looking at your data? Well, you need a VPN server. This is what the VPN service provides. You don't have to set up the second endpoint. Your computer is the one endpoint that you control. The other endpoint, the VPN server, is provided by this VPN turnkey service. In fact, it doesn't have to exist in or near your house. It can exist the other side of the world, which is one of the benefits it has, because you can now connect anywhere in the world and your data will be encrypted from your computer to that VPN server. So now the traffic that's going through the VPN tunnel goes around the hacker virtually, because it is encrypted, and he may see gobbledygook, but he can't see your data because the payload is encrypted. Okay, so the turnkey solution that we're talking about is software that you can load on your device, run, and install. It's very simple. What does it do for you? It provides data privacy because it scrambles and securely hides your data. Provides data integrity because once this data is encrypted, it can't be changed. Security because the process itself provides authentication. Provides anonymity in the sense that normally when you connect to the internet, you have to connect first to your internet service provider. That internet service provider provides you what's referred to as the external IP address. That's the cable modem or DSL modem that's in your house. That address can be easily detected by websites. But if you use one of these VPN services, you can connect to a VPN server that's on the other side of the world. That is the IP address that will get reported. So basically, you don't move anywhere yourself, but virtually, it's like you're relocating yourself to another part of the world. And this has many advantages. One is geo-blockades or geofencing. Some countries will not let you do something because it's prohibited by the government. Some services will not let you do something because certain types of services may be available in one country but not available in another country. So geographically, there are restrictions. But if you use this VPN and you select what they call an exit node, which is basically the location of the server in another country, you pick the location that you want from a list, and it looks as though that's where you're at, even though you're physically not there. In some countries, you can use this to bypass censorship because, again, you may not be physically somewhere else, but virtually, it's going to make it look as though you're in a different country that doesn't have censorship. You can also enable blocked applications in certain countries like Skype and Facebook. There are countries out there that block access to Skype and Facebook, quite a few of them. So if you use VPN, select a exit node in a country that allows Skype or Facebook, you can now use those services. And you can often use this to bypass other restrictions for geo-based content. And one of the examples that used to be used was Netflix. Netflix content is very country specific, so depending on where you're at, here in the States we could watch US content, but if you wanted to access content that came from somewhere on the other side of the world, they don't let you do that. One way to get around that used to be to use VPN and pick an exit node in the country that had content that you wanted to access. But they're getting smart to this. Netflix now will not let you do that. This is a problem we have. We have a problem, we come up with a solution. Then they challenge the solution, come up with another way to defeat that solution. This is going to go on for a while. It's going to be very interesting to see how things play out in the next couple of years. Be aware of it and use VPN to your advantage wherever you can. What do you look for in a VPN solution? Well, I think top of everybody's list is affordability. Everybody likes low cost. You should experience little performance impairment, okay? There is a compromise because, first of all, you're using an exit server located in a different city or state or even another country. That data has to go further and through more nodes, all of which can, just by the fact that it's going through so many places, be a little bit slower performance. also it's being encrypted. The process of encrypting at one end and decrypting at the other, then encrypting and decrypting in the other direction, that takes performance away, so it's going to make data a little bit slower. Some services don't want you using up all their bandwidth, and so they will have limits. And like everything else, you can usually get a higher limit if you're willing to pay more. So this is where you have to look when you're looking at free or low-cost VPN solutions. Is it giving you everything that you need? If not, look at competition. It's a new area of solutions. In the last couple of years, a lot of new products have been introduced, and there will be more that will come out, and the competition is going to make all these services become better, and you just need to look for one that that works for you, right? Now, if you're going to do this, servers and internet service providers typically log traffic, and they do this mostly for themselves because they need to, maintain their server farms. Okay, when they're done with these logs, you want them to be disposed, and you hope that there's nothing in the log that's what they consider personally identifiable. So you need to make sure when you're looking at VPN services that they say specifically no logs. They should all do that, but they don't. There's a few that don't. So look for no logs. There's a feature called a kill switch. If something happens at either end, it could be the computer, it could be the server, it could be the internet, something could happen that doesn't let your data get encrypted. You would sure like to know that, wouldn't you? Because once you connect and you think that you're secure, you're going to continue whether it's working or not. You're hoping that you can trust the software that you are encrypted. Well, a kill switch is a mechanism that checks itself, and if it ever fails, it stops the connection completely. So you're either going to be 100% encrypted or 0%. And when you're 0%, everything stops, and you're going to be aware that you need to make a new connection or check and find out what's going on. So kill switch is a mandatory feature that you need to have. You want to find flexibility and ease of use. The only way you're going to really find that out is by reading some reviews. People will comment about how easy it was to set up and how easy it is to use, and find something that sounds like it's within the means of your technical capabilities. Some of these services offer some optional features like ad blocking, and basically when you read an ad, a couple of things happen. The ad is a graphic image that has to be downloaded to your computer. Along with the ad usually comes cookies, because they want information stored on your computer about what your habits are. Did you react to the ad? Did you click on the ad? Those are that information stored in a cookie. It may also be running a script. So if you click on that ad, it wants to run a script, maybe to go to another website or launch some type of, another script. Who knows? So if you can block ads, you usually benefit from having faster computing experience when you're surfing. Although the caveat here is a lot of websites are getting smart to this, and if you have ads blocked or scripts blocked, they're starting to put messages up on your screen, and sometimes they will stop the website from functioning until you re-enable those things. Again, there was a problem, we had a solution, now they're challenging the solution by trying to make you defeat that, that solution. Now here's the thing, if you really want to be private, okay, you're a tinfoil hat kind of person, you don't want anybody to know what service you're using, okay? So you don't want to pay that service with your credit card, because once they get your credit card, they know who you are. And if something ever happens in the future where they have to, provide a list of users to the government or who knows, you would say, well, I don't want to be on that list. Well, there are payments that you can use that are anonymous, things like Bitcoin. Some people have suggested possibly bank cards and gift cards. Those might work too, but you have to be careful. Gift cards and bank cards are attached with information so that they know who the owner of that card is, where it came from. They use that for tracking. So I'm not so sure that's really a private way to make payments. All right, now we got to say, great, there's providers out there, there's solutions within reach, some of them are affordable. Can I trust these guys? So you look at what you put on your computer today. Where do you get this information, these programs that you run and these utilities? Well, you know, there are popular, well-known sources. If it comes from Microsoft, you can usually trust it. If it comes from Norton or McAfee or Avast or one of these companies that have big names that have been around for a long time, you can trust them. I know, to a certain extent. We won't get into that. But basically, they are programs that do the job, and if they tell you they're not stealing your data, then they probably aren't stealing data in a deviant way, all right? If you are using one of these VPN services, basically, it's like they are now becoming your new ISP. That means your data passes through their servers. They get a chance to see everything in its unencrypted state. You want to make sure then that you pick somebody that you can trust. There are free options out there. Free is a great attraction, but a lot of the ones I've looked at that are free, I don't know who they are. Do I really want to take a chance? This is something you're going to have to come to grips with. How much money you're willing to spend for a little bit of, you know, peace of mind. I think when it comes to security, you aren't really secure if there's a potential that you could be compromised. And so I would be very careful in picking well-reviewed, reputable companies because there are plenty of them out there. Mobile world is very, very, very prone to hacking and security concerns. There are mobile apps that you can load on your phone. Watch the permissions. Now, this is a security program. A lot of times security programs loaded onto your phone, in order to work, need lots of permissions. But you need to do your due diligence here. You need to look at the program and what it has access to and decide if you want to trust it. And it's not easy for me to give you a blanket answer because it's different in every case. Just try to look, read reviews, find out what people are saying about it, and make up your mind based on the extra information that you can find. Let's talk about some. All right. Different products that you can get. I'm not going to give you like the one or two that you should download. And the reason is, for one, I need to make a disclaimer that I can't recommend any one of these as being the absolute best cure for all the problems, okay? There are too many of them out there. There are new ones coming on board all the time. They're all going through improvements and enhancements. So every month that you go look on the web and you read an article about best VPN of 2017, you're going to find a lot of variance in people's opinions and the reviews. I think you may find out that whatever you pick today may not be the best pick that you'll get next year. So be prepared that you may just, you know, pick the best one this year, buy a one-year subscription, and next year buy another one. As long as it's in one of the top 3, say, VPN solutions, you're probably okay. Don't get too hung up on the absolute best. Consider the cost, consider the features, consider the reputation, and buy what works for you. So here's a few that wind up a lot on lists in all the reviews: ExpressVPN, PIA, NordVPN, PureVPN. Those are 4 or 5 that I would say have a good reputation. And if you look at the pricing, they vary a lot. And the pricing is probably going to change over time, like all new products. It's very competitive. So, you know, looks like you could shoot a goal for $3 a month to have pretty good security. Do these ones that are more expensive give you more features? Yes, they usually do. One could be more exit nodes. So if you need a specific country, be sure you review the list of exit nodes, the places that you can select to connect to, because that may be the decision maker for you. Now, I was trying to find one free program that might have a good reputation. The one that gets mentioned the most is TunnelBear. Like everything else, they try to get you in on something they're calling free, but then they want you to upgrade to a better set of features, higher bandwidth and speed, more users, that type of thing. Well, if you're just looking to experiment, you know, TunnelBear seems like a lot of users, and it could be a good way to go for free, but I'm not really sure. Again, read the reviews. You'll find reviews that look like this, and these are really nice because they lay it out for you. You can find lots of information at a glance, and again, this is where you'll see a lot of the top 3 to 5 are frequently going to be a lot of the same ones. Check multiple websites because everybody's review is going to change. The EC on here, this is the editor's choice. So that might help you. You might say, okay, well, if the editor likes this program better than another program, then I'm going to take a look at that. And so read the reviews. All right, this is a little bit busy. So I want to see if I can switch to.
Joe, we have about 5 minutes.
Okay, I'll get into wrapping this up. I'm in Opera browser, and if I want to, I can go into a new private window. You'll see that the bar has turned. Is this coming out? I hope on the share. You'll note that it's a black bar because I'm using a private browser, which kills all the cookies and makes my activity less trackable. And you'll also see that I have VPN enabled.
They can't see anything, Joe.
Can't see it?
No, as I said, you shared the PowerPoint, not the desktop. So.
All right, I'm going to go back because we're limited on time. I don't want to mess this up.
Tab ought to get you there.
Okay, are we back to the presentation?
Not yet.
Oh, then I got to go back.
Just minimize the browser.
Digital camouflage, private browsing.
I can see your presentation behind the browser. There you go.
Okay. Sorry about that, folks. So to avoid wasting any time, I'll just continue on here because we're getting kind of close to the end. Using the Opera browser is probably the simplest way to protect yourself with free VPN. It's very trustworthy, but again, like I mentioned earlier, this is only when you're using a browser. No other data is being encrypted except your web browsing. So if you access your bank through a web browser rather than an app, the browser will encrypt it. Hopefully the app is encrypting it anyways, okay, but it's not going through the VPN tunnel. Notice in the lower right here, there is a list of what they're calling optional locations. So right now, Opera supports Canada, United States, Germany, Netherlands, Singapore. It's a very short list. You're getting this for free. One of the things is it doesn't have a lot of choices for exit nodes. Okay. With Opera browser, you can block ads. So Opera has a lot of nice features in it, and it's free, and it might be worth checking out. Kaspersky happens to just be, you know, like all the big names, Norton, McAfee, they probably all have a VPN solution. And what they typically do is they tease you with a low-end free version, and then when you start to find out that it's not good enough, they'll tempt you with, you know, upgrading to a pay program. Avast is a very good one, and Avast makes a great security suite, and one of the features they offer is VPN, and it can be fairly affordable, so it's another one to look at. And for Android, now I don't do Apple products, so I can't really recommend, and I know there are limitations with what Apple allows you to do, but you know, here's a few for Android. In addition to the ones that we talked about, you know, these are things you can look at for your Android. If you really want to get into it in a very complex way, Windows itself has support built into it for doing VPN. However, it is complex, and I don't recommend it for people. I recommend the solution we just talked about. Okay, so talk a little bit about caveats and things you have to think about. Basically, when you think about how this works, the VPN encrypts the transmit and receive data, scrambles it so it can't be observed and can't be used for anything bad. And it helps you behave as if you're browsing from a different location, right? So that's good. However, your ISP is still going to see that header containing your source and destination address. The addresses of these VPN ISP that you pay money to may know that you're connecting to a VPN service. Without open internet, they may cause restrictions on this at some point. So stay tuned, because we're going to see what's going to happen in the future. If you're connecting to the web, you could still have web beacons and cookies and other things, so you have to run the other software for analytics and all of that. Social networks are notorious for collecting data. Be very careful there. Zoom. Here we go into the last couple of screens here now. So VPN is a great way to protect yourself. Hide your sensitive data. It makes your data, difficult or impossible to detect. Get you past the geo-blockades, and makes you anonymous because you leave less traces on the internet. And should you be using it? Absolutely yes. I recommend that you take some time to go explore, look for a solution that works for you, and give it a test. And here we are. Time for questions.
Okay. Am I unmuted?
I can hear you.
Okay, I had to look. Okay. So again, if you have a question, think of something later, feel free. You can email him at that email address. The one question we have, something about, what about a Tor or Onion browser? That makes no sense to me, but I hope it makes sense to you.
It sure does. So there's another way of anonymizing yourself on the internet, and it's called Tor, T-O-R. It stands for the Onion Router. And thinking of how an onion exists, it's layers. You peel off layer after layer after layer. What this does is it uses other member computers to help relay your information as it goes through the internet. So the information is going to start from my computer in my browser. And then when it goes out, it can connect to one or more nodes which happen to be other people's Tor computers, right? So if you and I and several of our friends all have Tor, we're basically volunteering our computer to act as relay stations. And it's kind of like when you see on TV, Jack Bauer is trying to track down some bad guy. Oh, he's in Canada. Oh, he's in Chicago. Oh, now he's in China. This anonymizes where your data is coming from, and it bounces all over the place. So it is another way that you can obscure your information. Each has its pros and cons, and we don't have time to really do a contrast here, but it's a very good question, and I hope that I helped explain it a little bit.
We got one more question, then we'll call it a day.
All right.
Does VPN apply only to browsing, or what about email?
There you go. Very good. If you have a browser-based VPN like Opera, it's only what's going through the browser. So if you connect to your email as webmail, then yes, that's going to be encrypted. But if you just use something like Microsoft Outlook or Mozilla Thunderbird, that doesn't go through your browser. Those clients connect to the internet directly, and that data will not be encrypted unless you run a VPN client. So the VPN software that we talked about, the VPN Turnkey solution, that will encrypt your email.
Okay. Thank you very much, Joe.
I throw in one more comment. There's one more thing I did want to bring up now.
Okay.
So every time we come up with a solution, somebody wants to challenge, right? And corporations don't like the fact that you now have a way to sit at the office, use VPN to connect outside of work, and do anything you want, and they have no way to monitor your traffic. Now, they have an obligation as a company to protect their own intellectual property, make sure that you're not doing bad things like sharing company information with a competitor, that type of thing. And they also don't want you watching bad movies and things at work. So they typically will scan traffic and look at the content of that traffic. If you're using VPN, you now have hidden your traffic. They have found a way around that. So I just want to mention to you, if you're interested in that type of thing, go to the internet and look up Steve Gibson fingerprint service. It's very complicated, but normally I would tell you if you use VPN, you're very protected, but this is one exception, that at your office or in other certain instances, they may be fooling VPN and they will be able to see your data. So be aware of that.